Harker Schnabel is taking on one of his biggest projects yet, buying an old gold mine in Bolivia. It turns out that this huge Bolivian mine was the prize. Yes, this mine gave him and his staff millions of dollars. This old mine has a lot of history and a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of risks. Let's get right into it today and see what this bold move has in store. He had reached a crucial moment in his quest, the entry to Bolivia, a place famed for its rich minerals and treacherous terrain. Even though the stakes were high, Parker stayed positive. His first goal was to go into the mine, but more importantly, he wanted to gain the people's trust. He was resolved to get to know them better, so that they would finally let him see the operation in person and understand what was going on. But the problems didn't stop. The crew's rented car couldn't handle the whole trip, so they had to ditch it in Peru, right before the Bolivian border. They had no other choice except to keep going on foot. The last section of their trip took them across a 160-yard stretch of no man's land, which is a lonely, unclaimed area between the two countries. As they got closer to the border, many were nervous and excited. This was a very important part of their trip, because they were about to enter Bolivia's gold-rich districts. When they got to Bolivia, a trusted local source had set up a replacement automobile for them, so the team could resume their trip right away. Peru was quite difficult, but it also taught me a lot about the mining industry there. Parker was sure that Bolivia had a lot more potential, and that the discoveries there may change the whole trip. The crew has also found promising gold reserves in the Peruvian town of La Rinconada. The rich metal veins they were looking for ran south across the Andes and into Bolivia. Their next stop was Pua Puo, a small frontier settlement with a lot of gold that was built on the same quartz veins that had supported La Rinconada for thousands of years. The group would have to drive for 8 hours across the vast empty Altiplano Plateau, which is one of the highest and quietest places on Earth, to get to Pua Puo. This faraway area, with its wide plains and tall mountain ranges, was the perfect place for their gold hunting trip. For a long time, miners and adventurers have known about the Altiplano's hidden treasures, which are rich in minerals. Because they didn't have a clear plan, they were determined to visit as many mining areas as possible, hoping to locate gold in the most unlikely spots. The town's isolation made them feel like they were at the end of the world, but it also hinted at the wealth that lay beneath the surface, which had seen its fair share of gold rushes and seemed to have been forgotten by time. Bolivia was one of South America's top gold producers in the 1800s, and miners came to the country to get rich. Still, a lot of the land stayed undeveloped because of bad conditions and a lack of infrastructure. Parker knew that this risky direct method may easily go wrong, but he was willing to take the chance, because it could lead to big money in such a historic place. Parker and Diego decided to leave the rest of the crew and look for someone who may tell them about mining in the area. They talked to a local man in the hopes that he may tell them about any hidden gold veins that might be nearby. The local man had some interesting things to say while they talked. He talked of the Spanish conquistadors who had traveled to these nations years before Parker, looking for the same prize he was, gold. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors were European soldiers and explorers who went to the Americas to find riches, power, and more land for the Spanish Empire. They explored huge areas in search of gold, silver, and other valuable resources, often enslaving native people in the process. Hernan Cortés and Francisco Pizarro were famous leaders who led expeditions that destroyed mighty civilizations like the Aztec and Inca empires. The stories of tremendous wealth in South America, especially the legendary El Dorado, lured conquistadors to locations like Bolivia, where they thought they could find great treasures hidden in the mountains and rivers. The discovery of the Potosi silver mines, one of the world's largest reserves, made Spain more interested in Bolivia. The conquistadors were very interested in gold as well as silver, and they did everything they could to get it. Parker's gaze scanned the area around them, taking in the gravel and unique rock formations that showed they were in a place that used to have a lot of gold. It was clear that this area had been home to generations of prospectors, all of whom wanted to get rich. Parker was interested, and asked the man if he had ever done any mining himself. The man nodded quietly, which showed that he was a gold miner. Parker, who was curious, asked further questions, wondering whether the man had a secret place where he got his gold. The miner just smiled and didn't say anything directly. It seemed like some things were too important to share. His cautious answer said a lot. He was happy to tell stories, but he wasn't going to give away all of the knowledge he had worked so hard to get. Parker said that prospectors usually start by panning nearby creeks for float gold in situations like these. Small particles move downstream from bigger ones. Finding float gold is often a good sign that there is more gold upstream that is waiting to be found. But they ran into problems right away as they started their employment. The wet terrain around them was not a good indicator for a successful gold quest. Parker knew from experience that muddy conditions usually meant that it was harder to find gold. The dirt didn't have the usual golden shine, and when they looked through the sludge, they didn't find much. Parker's first hope vanished as he looked through the pan and saw that it was empty of the costly metal they were looking for. He added, "Just yellow rock," and you could hear the anguish in his voice. They had hoped to find at least a small piece, but thus far their search had turned up nothing. Even though he had lost, Parker stayed determined because he knew that prospecting usually took time and effort. The day had been frustrating, but it wasn't a complete surprise. A lot of the time, prospecting means going through a lot of ups and downs, and today seemed to be harder than usual. Parker, on the other hand, wasn't ready to quit up yet. He looked around and noticed a woman across the street wearing a wide-brimmed hat. He responded, "Maybe we can get some leads by asking her," hoping that she or someone close to her may help. Things started to go better for them when they met a local miner who was working with gold at the time. The man was kind enough to share his results with Parker and the crew, which got them excited again. As they all crowded around, the miner pulled a small piece of gold out of his pocket. It was a shiny piece of the treasure they had been looking for. "No way," Parker said, his eyes wide with excitement. It was a small piece of gold which showed them they were in the proper area. The miner from the area then said that he has more things in his collection. Parker was interested in what the local miner had found over the river in the Golden Eagle area. Parker, eager to take use of this new information, asked the miner to show them the exact spot where he had been working. With this possible lead, their resolve rose, and they set out again with much more excitement, hoping to find gold in the same spot. But it's important to remember that Parker Schnabel was more than just a teenager with high dreams. He grew up in Alaska, where mining was a big part of life. He was raised in Haines, Alaska, where he was surrounded by the mining industry from a young age. John Schnabel, his grandfather, managed the famous Big Nugget Mine, a modest but successful business that became a local legend. Parker's grandfather taught him about gold mining for hours and hours every summer, when he was a kid. Parker had learned a lot as a kid, by practicing different mining techniques, like panning, sluicing and operating heavy machinery. His hands-on experience got him ready for the challenges of the sector, and gave him a deep grasp of how hard it is to find gold. This background not only helped him reach his goals, but it also set him up for a successful career as a miner and reality TV star. When Parker Schnabel was 16, the mining season at school and the academic year overlapped a little bit, and no one, not even my parents, was too happy about it. My folks were not happy. He took on the major job of running the Big Nugget Mine, which was a big deal for someone so young. He was willing to risk everything the team had earned the year before, in order to start the business, knowing that things needed to be better for it to work. He was in charge of more than simply the physical work of mining. He also had to manage the firm, oversee the equipment, work with the staff, and make key choices that could make or break the company's success. Even though he had a lot of responsibilities, Parker showed that he could handle them all. He bravely chose to bypass college and use his education fund to pay for his first mining season instead. He made this option because he was so dedicated to the mining industry, and it turned out to be a terrific investment. Parker and his staff were able to get back roughly 1,000 ounces of gold in his first full season of running the mine on his own. This made him about $55,000, which is a lot of money for someone who is new to the business. This early accomplishment not only showed Parker's skills and dedication, but it also got the attention of the makers of Gold Rush, a popular Discovery Channel reality show that followed miners as they tried to make money in the gold fields. His amazing success story struck a chord with viewers, paving the way for him to become one of the show's biggest stars, and making his name known in the cutthroat world of gold mining. Parker Schnabel quickly became a fan favorite on Gold Rush because he worked hard, was a great leader, and was always dedicated to the mining industry. Fans watched him grow not only as a miner, but also as a strong leader over the years. As his business increased, so did his goals. Each season, he set more ambitious goals for how much gold he wanted to produce. Many miners would have been happy with a few hundred ounces, but Parker kept pushing the limits and wanted thousands of ounces. He was different from the people around him because he was competitive and never gave up. Parker's path, on the other hand, was not easy. One of the hardest things he had to deal with happened while he was in the Klondike. Russell's Dominion Gold Resources, a place that is known for being one of the best places in the world to mine gold. Even though the episode has shown that mining is hard and unexpected, Parker's capacity to deal with these problems is even more impressive. The Klondike area in Canada's Yukon Territory is famous for the gold rush that happened there in the late 1800s. The Klondike Gold Rush began when gold was found in Bonanza Creek in 1896. It reached its peak in 1897 and 1890-80. Thousands of optimistic miners, called stampeders, risked their lives to get to the gold-rich creeks, even though the winters were harsh and the terrain was hard to get through. The Klondike Gold Rush turned the area into a busy hub of activity, with communities like Dawson City becoming important centers for mining and support services. The allure of gold drew people from all walks of life, making the society more diverse and active, but the boom didn't last long. By the early 1990s, most of the gold deposits that were easy to get to had run out. During one of his seasons in the Klondike, he had a lot of technical problems, logistical problems, and fewer mineable surfaces. To mine successfully in this area, you need to plan ahead not just where to dig, but also how to transport important tools and manage a team in such a distant area. The weight of these activities started to wear on Parker, making him wonder if it was worth it to keep going. But even in these hard times, his determination shone through. Parker's most renowned mining trip was to Guyana, which is in South America. At first, Guyana seemed like an exciting new area for him and his team, because the jungles were rumored to be full with gold. Parker quickly found out that mining in this area was much harder than he had thought it would be. The extreme heat, high humidity, and thick vegetation made it almost difficult to work. While they were in Guyana, the crew faced a number of problems. It was typical for equipment to break down. Heavy rains turned roads into mud pits, and it seemed like the jungle was working against them at every step. Local rules and political problems made things further harder. We'll just look for a small creek like that, get some decent gravel, and pan out some gold. That's a good way to remember why we're here. I'm making it almost impossible to start a real mining business. After weeks of hard work, Parker's team came back empty-handed, with no gold to show for their efforts. This trip was a huge letdown, but it taught them important things about how mining can be unpredictable, and how important it is to be ready to adjust when things go wrong. Parker's time in Guyana was hard, but his work in the Yukon has been much more fulfilling. The Yukon is known as one of the wealthiest places in the world for gold, and Parker has found some of the most amazing gold there while working on Gold Rush. Parker got around 6,000 ounces of gold in one of his best seasons, which brought in millions of dollars. This huge achievement not only made him a top miner on Gold Rush, but it also gave him the money he needed to grow his mining business. One thing that makes Parker Schnabel stand out from other miners is his strong work ethic. People recognize him for pushing his workforce to their limits. He often works long hours and expects everyone on the mining operation to do their best. Parker's way of thinking about mining is simple. To be successful, you have to be willing to take risks and work hard. He thinks that mining is more than just finding gold. It's also about running the business part of the organization well. This means making smart investments, keeping an eye on prices, and always seeking for fresh chances. Parker is also working on a project called Parker's Trail, in addition to his work on the show. This spin-off show follows Parker Schnabel as he follows in the footsteps of great gold rush adventurers. His voyage down the Klondike Trail, a historic route where many miners risked their lives to find gold,
was one of the most exciting parts of the series. The Klondike Trail is well known for being very hard, with freezing temperatures and perilous heights. Parker had many of the same problems as the first miners on his expedition, such as freezing temperatures, running out of food and being physically tired, which affected both him and his team. Parker's constant determination and great leadership helped them finish the hard trip. Parker has also expanded his mining operations to Australia, which is known for being one of the richest gold-producing areas in the world. This step was taken to give Parker more chances. The history of gold mining in Australia is an important part of the country's growth. Finding gold, the economy growing, and society evolving are all things that happen in this chapter. British immigrants in New South Wales said they found gold in Australia in the 1790s. This was the first time that gold was linked to Australia. On the other hand, the gold rush didn't start until a big find was made. Edward Hargreaves found gold at Bathurst, New South Wales, in 1851. This was the start of the gold rush. This finding drew in a huge number of prospectors and settlers, which led to the quick building of new towns and mining camps. In the 1850s, a lot of gold was found, mostly in the state of Victoria. The most famous gold fields were in Ballarat and Bendigo. These discoveries led to the growth of wealthy settlements and a huge rise in the number of individuals who moved to the area to seek their fortunes in the gold fields. There was also societal upheaval during the gold rush, the most famous of which was the Eureka Revolt in Ballarat in 1854. Miners rebelled against high license fees and government rules, which was the start of a very important time for democracy in Australia. In the end, the result was changes to mining legislation and more rights for miners. This showed how the balance of power was changing in the colonies. As Parker gets used to new places and rules, he has an interesting job to do. These places are extremely different from the Yukon. Parker Schnabel is working strategically to make his mining operations more varied and look for new ways to get gold, and this move into Australia is part of that effort. This project is still in its early phases, but it shows a lot of promise for success, maybe even more than what he did in the Yukon. The gold mining industry is always changing as new technologies and rules change how miners do their jobs. Parker has always been at the forefront of these new ideas by spending a lot of money on the latest mining equipment and keeping up with the latest mining methods. I suppose most of this run was in ditches, right? Yes, ground that is being dumped. One of the biggest problems he has had to deal with is the prospective damage that gold mining could do to the environment. Miners are under increasing and more pressure to use procedures that are more ethical and long-lasting. Parker knows about these problems and is working hard to make sure that his firm has as little of an impact on the environment as possible. His trips to Bolivia show that he wants this. If you liked this look at Parker's trip and want to hear more about his thrilling exploits, be sure to subscribe to get the latest news and updates. Thanks for viewing, and I'll see you soon.